Welcome everyone, and thank you all so much for joining us today. My name's Lily and I'm the Ecosystem Manager for our Barclays Eagle Lab in Liverpool. Super excited to be hosting today's virtual event and joined by Mike Lovegrove for the second time. Hello, Mike. Mike is the founder of Snowballing, and today he's going to teach us all about turning a pitch into a sale. This is part of a two-part series, so if you've missed the previous one, we'll put the link in the chat. You can find it on YouTube, and the title was Master B2B Lead Generation on a Limited Budget. So check that one out because it will make more sense for the rest of the session today. Before we do get started, I just wanted to kind of highlight for those that are maybe new to Barclays and new to Eagle Labs what it is we do and point you in a few directions for certain things that we can support on. So Barclays Eagle Labs, we're an entrepreneurial network providing support to ambitious startup and scale-up businesses. Our mission is to connect the UK's entrepreneurial ecosystem through our networks, support, expertise, all with the aim of helping businesses to innovate and grow. We provide learning resources, dedicated growth programs, access to experts, and a collaborative community designed to help businesses on their growth journey through virtual support and physical spaces across the UK. One of the particular areas of support I wanted to highlight today was the Entrepreneur Academy. Essentially, it's a free online learning tool to support you in that growth journey. One of the modules that we have, I think, would be quite relevant to today's session is titled Accessing Markets and Making Sales. So that would be perfect for you guys. We'll pop it in the link in the VBox as well, or you can find it on academy.uk.barclays. Before I pass over to Mike, I do just have to read a quick disclaimer. So we have asked Mike to join us today to provide some tips and tricks on the art of turning a pitch into a sale. The topics discussed are an overview of options for you to think about and to help you with your independent research and your business decisions. So they're not intended as recommendations or advice. Remember as well that your business has its own individual circumstances. So the statements and views expressed may not be applicable or suitable for your business. Now, if you found us via YouTube, you can find a link to the box in the description below, and then you can join us in the chat function. Mike will ask you guys to share some kind of questions along the journey, and I can pick them out during, or we'll do a bit of a Q&A after. So just throw your comments in, and we'll aim to answer as many as we can at the end. But that is enough from me. Super excited for today, Mike. If you want to introduce the session and yourself, that would be fabulous.
Thank you for having me, Lily. First off, welcome everybody. For those that came to the session a few weeks ago, you will already know that the accent comes from New Zealand. So that is where I was born and raised. I've since been living in the UK and Europe for the last few years. So I still have that New Zealand accent. Before we jump in, I'm really keen to understand who's here today, because that will allow me to personalize more of this presentation as we go through it and answer some of those questions, those burning questions that you have about sales. So if you can drop into the chat what your role is and what you really want to get out of today, then that will help me make this session that much more tailored. So drop that in. There is about an 8-second delay before I see that. So I'm going to continue while you respond. So how do we go from a booked meeting to a paying client, or how do we go from a pitch to a closed customer? That's what we want to go through today. And so first off, I'm going to give you a quick background about who I am for those of you who are unaware. We'll dive into the sales mentality that is going to help you to have great conversations and close deals. We'll then jump into the discovery framework, and that's the first conversation you're having with a new prospect, where it's a one-on-one conversation. We'll then move into the pitch framework on how you then position your product or your service to that prospect. We'll then also touch on the proposal framework. So there's a lot of stuff we're obviously going through today. And then we'll, at the end, touch on persuasion and pricing. Cool. So a brief overview of my background. So I've previously started and sold a tech company out of New Zealand. We entered 3 different markets. It was ranked as a top 2 fintech in Asia Pacific by Money 2020. That was in a we sold to enterprises. It was an insurance distribution platform, and that was sold in 2020. And then I moved into a VP of sales role, and I grew the company from 1 to 4 million, and we entered 3 markets. And that was done in 15 months, by the way. And then as the general manager of Fresher, a company you may already know, I was the GM there, and we grew from 12 to 19 million, achieved profitability, and got to that unicorn status. And that was in a period of 10 months, right? And each one of these companies, I used what is effectively the same growth formula to achieve that type of growth. And so I thought on the back of that, can I help other people do this? And so what I do now is I run a company called Snowballin', and I help founders go from C to Series B stage and create that really predictable revenue growth that they're looking for. And I'm going to go through some of the playbooks that I use right now. So at Snowballin', I've worked with over 100 startups, either directly or indirectly. And so this is coming from those experiences, as well as the ones of being hands-on working with these startups and scale-ups. And to show how valid this is a text I got a couple of weeks ago from a lady who went through my sales accelerator at the end of last year. So in the space of 9 months, she went from almost closing her business down because it just wasn't working to, in the first month, 50 grand in revenue, now having a sales system, and then getting all the way to $5.8 million in contracted revenue 9 months later. Crazy, right? And so the amazing thing about this is that she wasn't a salesperson. She'd never been a salesperson, but she learned how to do this and was able to apply it. So this is really valid, guys. So take as many notes as you can, screenshot the pages if you want to. And also you will get access to a bunch of resources and templates at the end of this. So you also don't have to go and make this stuff from scratch. Now, while this slide is almost bare, I'm going to just have a look at some of these questions. Early stage founder looking to land their first few B2B clients. A broker, so how can you convince someone they need your service? We'll definitely dive into that. Founder without sales experience, that's almost everybody. Get clear on the mentality as often pitches or sales meetings. Fill me with fear. So we're totally going to touch on that. And you've said in your message, you're also slightly fixated on demonstrating all the features of your product. Very normal thing to do. I used to do that when I first started out as well. And we'll talk about how you can avoid that. We have a personal development coach, launching an app, business degree student, fit tech, SaaS founder, early stage and MVP development, wanting to understand how to pitch. Cool. All right. So we're going to cover most of the stuff as we go through. So we have the numbers 7, 11, and 4 on the screen. And this is just a recap of the session we went through a few weeks ago. And what that stands for is, in order for someone to trust you and to want to buy from you, they need to spend 7 hours with you across 11 touch points in 4 different mediums. Now, a lot of people, when they hear that, they instantly think, wow, how am I going to create that much time with potential customers to make the sale? And what we went through in the last session, which Lily is going to be linking somewhere around for you to watch, is how you do that. But I wanted to give you a quick recap or a quick refresher if you came along. So the first thing is you have to really define your ICP. And that is going very, very narrow. The way in which that I was able to achieve exponential growth at each company that I've worked in is by narrowing who I'm targeting. Because when you narrow, you make it much easier to first create a product for that specific person, and then it becomes way easier to sell it because you have these case studies that are very similar. and they relate to the next person you're trying to sell to. So narrow that ICP. Around that ICP, all of your marketing activity needs to be about them. So it's not about you, not about vanity. It's about how do we get in front of this ICP? And then around the outside of that, you want to work on, okay, how do I create a sales process that is going to be an incredible experience to that ICP, or at least the buyer persona within the ICP. And what we did was we talked about the different things you can do for free or largely for free. So you can host or go to community events where your ICP is. And you can start socially selling, which in today's age means you're either posting on Instagram or you're on LinkedIn. Wherever your ICP is typically hanging out, that is where you are posting. That is where you are sending messages directly to them. Because when you do this, what you're doing is you're entering different mediums with that prospect. So if we think about the 7-11-4, if you have met someone at a community event and then you've connected with them on LinkedIn, and then they've seen a post of yours on LinkedIn, or you've engaged on theirs, and then you've started to interact in a one-on-one like messaging conversation, you've just hit 3 channels and doing something that is arguably free. And so we've already knocked off 3 of the 4 channels that we effectively need for this person to trust us. And then the next thing is video outreach. It's very much underdone. If you then send a personalized video to people that you've already started to engage with in this capacity, you've just ticked off another medium and another touch point. And you're doing something a little bit different. And in each stage, right, you're spending time with your ideal customer profile or with your prospect. And a couple other ones is like picking up the phone and calling them. And for whatever reason, Canva has decided that it's not going to show the last circle, which is partnerships. And so if you start doing a combination of these things, that is all about adding value to your prospect, to your ideal customer profile, you will naturally hit the 7 hours of airtime with them. It might not be one-on-one, but it is airtime in some way, shape, or form. You will have 11 touch points across 4 mediums. And that creates the trust, which brings them into your sales funnel. So you can have this one-on-one conversation to then see if what your product does, what your service does, is going to help this person to solve whatever problem it is that they have. Hopefully that makes sense. We go more in depth in the other session, and so that link is somewhere around. So for today, we want to really look at the sales funnel, and we want to focus here. So this top of the funnel is the lead generation. If you don't have leads, the rest doesn't necessarily matter. So that's why we focus there to start with. Now we're into, all right, we've got the meeting. What do we do to turn that meeting into a customer? So we're talking about qualification, demoing what we have or demoing our capability. We're then talking about how we propose a solution, how we negotiate, and how we win the deal. So when it comes to a mentality of how to approach sales, the first thing is a lot of people think that sales is trying to sell something to someone that they don't need. That is the wrong mental view to have when you go into any one of these meetings. What sales is you're trying to solve a problem for your prospect. And the reason why I start with that is you don't need a background in sales to do that. You just need to know how to solve problems, right? And so the best salespeople, they don't come across as trying to push like a product or a service down someone's throat. What they're doing is they're trying to solve a problem for their prospect. They are an expert in the particular field of the product or service that they're selling. And so literally anyone can be a salesperson. And seeing some of the comments down on my screen from what people have put into the chat is that this might be their first foray into sales. And what I want to urge you to believe is that you can absolutely do this. I started without any experience in sales and became very good at it by learning how to do this. That example I showed you before, exactly the same. No experience in sales, got very good at it. So lock that in. You can absolutely do this. And so the mentality shift you have to make is that I've already kind of said this, but your job is to identify and solve a problem. And you as the salesperson are the consultant, you are a collaborator, and you're a partner to the prospect. And it doesn't matter what sales methodology you use. There will be plenty of things you might see online about you must qualify your prospect and you must do this, that, and the other. Honestly, none of that really matters if we don't identify and solve a problem. So I want to focus today on how we can do that, because the number of people that I see, or even that I work with, that think they are uncovering the problem when actually they are missing a massive part to it that is preventing them from really understanding the problem and being able to charge the right amount for what they do. So we want to focus on the problem to start with. And this part of the mentality you need to take into your sales conversations is eating a bit of humble pie. So unfortunately, nobody cares about you. Nobody cares about your product or service. What your prospect cares about is their life and their business. And when you flick that switch in your mind, and your job is not to say how great you are or your business is, your job is to truly understand them, because again, they only care about, the problems that are in front of them. They probably care more about what they're having for dinner than what your product or service does. And so you need to get in their shoes. The only way to get in their shoes is to truly understand their problem. So to some of the questions that came in about, I want to pitch more of my features and products, and I need to pull myself out of it. It's great you've got the awareness. If you go on with this mentality, like actually the prospect does not care about these features. What they care about is an objective that they have or solving a problem that they have, then I think you'll instantly start to reframe how you address those meetings. And if you do not find a problem, you will not be able to make a sale. Like, that is period, the thing. And if you don't find the problem and you make a sale, chances are it'll be a reluctant purchase, and it will either result in churn or an unsatisfied customer. So even if someone's coming in banging down your door saying, I want this product, unless it is because they're trying to solve a problem that your product solves, you shouldn't sell it to that person, right? That's a really key point. So how do we find the problem? Sounds very simple, but I see so many companies, so many individuals get this wrong. And so the best way to look at this is this framework called the GAP. And this is not my own, but it's probably the best one that I have seen when it comes to illustrating how to find the problem. And so your prospect, when you're talking to them, has a current state. It's where they are today. Now, where they want to go is their future state. And so we need to understand this. We need to ask the right questions to understand where they are today and where they want to go. And depending on how big that gap is, that's our value. And if we can increase that gap by asking the right questions, then our perceived value also increases. So for example, I'll use snowballing as an example. If a founder comes to me and they're wanting to grow from 500,000 to 2 million in annual recurring revenue in the next year, then we have a 1.5 million pound gap. If I can help them solve that, that's the value that I'm able to give to them. Now, if I can do that for 100,000 pounds, is that a fair trade? Probably. If you can help someone get to a certain outcome and it is about a tenth the cost to get there, that is probably something that's a good trade-off that they're going to make. Now, I know that is very simplistic, but that is the thought process you should go through when you are engaging with a prospect and trying to understand how big their problem is. There's a few other questions popping in, and for what it's worth, if you have any questions, do pop them in the chat. And if they are relevant at the point in time, I'll try to pick those up as we go through. Otherwise, at the very end of this, I'll go through and answer all the questions that come up in the chat. And one of them that just came through was how important is storytelling when trying to close a sale. I would say it's very important because sales is first emotional, right? Logic backs it up, but the first thing they want to feel is like the emotional element of, like this future state is possible. And that's the thing that I think a lot of people miss is they lead with logic. Like, if you use our solution, you'll reduce overheads by 30% or something relatively generic like that. That doesn't say anything about the future state. That is a very logical future state. What is a better future state is you are now going to have more time. So you know how you missed all those family meals last week, Dave? Well, you're going to be able to have dinner with your family every single night because you use our solution. That makes it emotional. And that is something that is sort of storytelling, right? And if you use that plus a real example of our customer, Sandy, over here, she used to be working 80-hour weeks, missing family dinners. Then she started using our solution. Now she makes every single one of her family dinners. There's your storytelling. Like you are telling a story about the outcome that you've been able to achieve with a prospect or with a current customer. So I'm going to go through how you have this conversation to get this information out, because I think it's a really important framework for everyone to understand. But before we get into that, the thing that you also need to know is that sales is about change, and your customers, your prospects don't like change. Like humans don't like change unless the current state, which we just talked about, is so uncomfortable that they need to move to the future state. And a way to make that current state so uncomfortable is to, one, make it emotional. So that example that I just gave there, it needs to relate back to them. And the second thing is that there needs to be an element of quantifying that particular gap. Like how much are they effectively losing on a daily or a weekly basis because they're not using your service or solution? What could they potentially be achieving if they just took the plunge and started working with you? So when I say the discovery format, I just want to explain this, that the discovery conversation is effectively the first meeting that you have with a prospect after you have, properly engaged with them in some other medium, and then they've booked this one-on-one conversation with you, or they've agreed to a one-on-one conversation with you. So you wouldn't do this if you are at a meetup and you meet someone and you're like, cool, all right, now I need to go through this discovery format. Like that's a bad idea. But if you're in a 30-minute meeting with someone, this is when you use this. So the first thing I want you to do is I want you to set the scene. And I mean, in a typical meeting, you're probably going to start off by talking about the weather. At least that seems to be the thing that always happens when I'm either being sold to or selling, is that you decide to talk about the weather or where you're dialing in from. And there will come a logical point where you need to introduce yourself. And when it comes to introducing yourself, what I suggest you say after you say, hey, my name is blah, you say this line, I'm glad we could meet today. Now, the reason why we say this line rather than love that we've been able to meet or thank you for taking the time is because we want to be on the same, we want to be on the same level as this person. Your time is valuable, their time is valuable. And what we don't want to infer is that their time is more valuable than ours, because it's not. Like it's just as valuable for you to be there as them. You're supposed to be trying to solve a problem for them, or to at least find out if there is a problem with solving. And so therefore, your level. So say that line, I'm glad we could meet today, is very neutral, but also inviting. And then what we want to do is we want to share the objective of the meeting. And the best thing to do in that first sales call, that first one-on-one meeting, is to have an objective similar to this. The objective of today's meeting is not to sell you anything. Instead, it's to see if it would make sense to have a second meeting or do business together. You choose. But the point of that, of saying that line, does a couple things. First off, it again suggests that we are purely here to figure out if it makes sense to work together. And the second thing, it's I'm not selling to you. So that is going to put your prospect at ease, and it's going to put you at ease, because there's nothing forced here. This is purely a discovery conversation to see if you can solve their problem. Now, after you say that, or a version of that, then you can ask them, mind if we discuss the agenda? And 99 times out of 100, they will say yes. And so you move from that objective and you move into introducing the agenda. And you can say something like, well, in order to achieve this objective, here's the agenda I was thinking. First, I need to understand a bit more about your business and why you wanted to meet today. And then I can start to tell you a little bit more about me and my business and how we potentially could help you. And if it makes sense, we can mutually decide on the logical next step. Now, again, they are going to agree to that. And a small pro tip, I would say, that you could do with this particular 1, 2, 3 sequence of activity, being introducing yourself, the objective, and the agenda, I would actually pull that up on some slides if it is a virtual meeting like this. And I would have their logo, their company's logo, sitting on each one of those slides. It's a very easy 20-second job you can do before a meeting, right? But it makes it feel really personal. And they will appreciate that, because nobody does it. Nobody does it for them. So just something, if you want to go that like 1% beyond, you would pull up those slides. So what we have just done is we've introduced the scene, and we are controlling the meeting. So many of you probably have experienced this. You've got into a meeting and the prospect has said, hey, can you show me a demo? And you jump straight into this demo of your product, but you get no information out of them. And they are controlling the meeting in that scenario. And you really want to control this, because what we need to do is we need to personalize our demo or our pitch to the prospect. And we do this by controlling the meeting. And if you start like this, you will control the meeting, because the prospect has agreed with you on the format. So they've just agreed. Now you want to set the scene one step further, and you want to give an example of what it's like, why businesses come to you, or why people come to you for your help. So as an example, I would say this: founders that are between seed to Series B typically engage me when they just can't seem to figure out their sales system. They can't seem to hire the right salespeople. They don't seem to be generating enough leads and closing enough business. As an example, Katie came to me 9 months ago. She was really struggling to close new business and generate the leads she needed. And in 9 months, she was able to book $5.8 million. So tell me, Steve, why did you want to meet today? And so I've just given this, I've told this story for the person that asked the storytelling question in the chat. I just told a story that is likely relevant to the person that I'm meeting. And then I've asked them, well, I've told them about the key problem that my buyers usually have. I've told them the outcome of what my buyers can get. And then I've asked for information from them. And now I've earned the right to ask questions. And that's what we're trying to do here. And it's not manipulating or anything like that. It's purely trying to get to the point of understanding enough about their business so that we can properly launch into a proposal. And all of this is going to make sense when we go through the proposal and pitching our product. So you've just set the scene. Now we want to understand the problem. And so we want to ask a number of questions that are about the prospect's business so that we can identify what the real problem is. And what I encourage you here is, and by the way, I do have a custom GPT that can help you with this. So you will get access to that at the end of this. That will help you to create some of these questions. But something like, why did you want to meet today? What prompted you to reach out? Depending on how the conversation got to this point, depending on where the lead came from, that's usually a good starting point. And they are going to start to tell you why. Now, depending on what problem it is that you solve, you're going to want to customize that. And you really want to drill into that. So I encourage asking another 2 to 3 deeper why-related questions that is going to uncover more around the problem. Now, where I see a lot of people going wrong is they stop there. They think, cool, I've understood that this person wants to generate more leads. Great, okay, now I can start to tell you about my business. But that's not enough. That's very surface level. And so what we next want to understand is the root cause. So, okay, and the 5 whys, if you've heard of that as a terminology, or 3 whys, that can help you to understand the root cause. So after they say, yeah, I'm not generating enough leads, you can say, well, what do you think is causing that? And questions like that will help to bring the root cause to the surface. And they might say, I just don't have enough time to really spend on any outbound related activity, or I actually just don't know where to start. I've never been a salesperson before. I've never been in a marketing role before. And so they start to then talk about the root cause problem, because that's the thing we want to solve, not leads. We need to solve why they don't have any leads. And for your business, obviously, it's going to be different. The example is just one that is very top of mind for me whenever I have these conversations. And then we want to understand the impact. And the key thing with the impact is we want to understand the impact on the individual and on their business if you are selling business to business. So a very standard question here, which I think is a great one, is how is this impacting you? And if we use the same example, chances are they will say, look, I'm really stressed about money. I'm really stressed about hitting payroll. Like, those are the things that come out of it. Or I'm not able to sleep at night because I'm so stressed. And so you're making this an emotional thing where, again, this isn't manipulating the prospect. You're just trying to understand how important this problem is. Like, if you went through this process and you found that the problem was very small, the root cause was like an easy fix, and the impact was virtually nothing, it doesn't make sense to sign up to your platform or your product or your service. So conversely, if they say something like that example I just gave, then that is worth solving, because this is causing this person a huge amount of stress. And then you also want to understand, well, how does it impact the business? And that example is self-explanatory, but you still want to ask it, because you need your prospect to voice this. You'll all experience this, right? When you are so deep in your own business, your own idea, in your own role, the surface of like the problems that are there, you start to just accept them as being, that is just how it is. And so when you get your prospect to voice this, they suddenly start to think, actually, it doesn't have to be this way. So you've now understood problem, root cause, impact. Then you want to quantify it. So, and this, if we think back to the gap, this is also helping us do that. So, okay, so you're not generating enough leads. What is your target for the year? And they will say. And then where do you think you'll get to at the end of the year if you do nothing? And again, they will say. And now you've just quantified how problematic that lead issue is. or how problematic the fact that they don't know how to generate their own leads is, or that they don't have time to generate their own leads. And so you've gone from a problem, root cause, impact, and you've quantified it. And you can take that. And if you have a call with a prospect after this, I would 100% encourage you do that. Even if you just have 4 questions ready to go. And obviously make it conversational, and you can move it in when it feels right. But if you get that information and you repeat it back to them, you are going to be in a far better place than if you just go and pitch your product aimlessly, or you only find out about the problem, or if you get into a situation where they are controlling the meeting. This makes sure that you keep control, and it makes sure you get the right information to do this next part, which is now we pitch. And when you go into pitch, also, I do know I'm going relatively fast through this, but because this is recorded, hopefully that is going to solve that particular problem. But I just wanted everyone to get this information for free as quickly as possible. So once we've gone through the discovery, now we can pitch. And I would encourage you not to pitch until you get that information. And what we want to be thinking about when we pitch is, how do we want the prospect to think? How do we want them to feel? What do we want them to do? And if we're thinking about that, and that's our mentality going in, then we will do something slightly different. And so the sales pitch framework that I do with all my clients, that I promote to all the startups that I work with, is this. The first thing, you want to teach the prospect something new. And so what is the changing world order, the nexus statement that is going to capture them? And even though they are supposed to probably be a subject matter expert in their field, if you teach them something about their field, you get instant credibility. Your job is not to be liked, your job is to be respected. And this is a way that you get that respect, by showing that you know what you're talking about. And so in my case, I might say that founder-led sales isn't an option, it's the only option. That might be something that I'd put on a first slide if I'm talking directly to a smaller startup. And then the next slide is the problems that that ideal customer profile that you have has. And when you list these out, you are saying to the other person, I understand you. And the really cool thing that you can do here is you can use their terminology with how you talk about it, based on the discovery. So they will have similar problems. There will be similar problems on the screen to what they have just said they have. And so even though it's in slightly different wording, you can phrase it as you speak it in the same words they used. And they will think, damn, this person gets me. So changing world order, what are the key problems that this ICP has? And then jump into, okay, what are some of the solutions that this person or this prospect could try that is not your product or your service? And so in my case, I might say, look, you can try Ask ChatGPT, you can try just learning as you go, you can throw a whole bunch of money at ads, and you can just hope that it works, might be the alternative solutions. And none of these really work because, and I would insert an explanation. And then dive into, what does the perfect world look like? And a perfect world, if I was pitching snowballing, the perfect world is where I have a sales system that I know how I'm able to generate leads predictably, and I know how I can turn those leads into revenue, and I have a system that I can then hire other people to follow so that they can do it as well. That's the perfect world. And so now you paint this perfect world, which again, potentially is their future state. If we come back to the where they are now versus where they want to go. Then you can say what your proposition is and your offer. And then you jump into, here is what we do. Here's specifically our differentiated value. And you might have 1 or 2 slides like that. And so you notice that I haven't jumped straight into demoing what I do. I have brought them on this journey. And again, this is a classic, like, we're telling a story here. Now, this this slide I think is really important. What people don't buy into is a whole bunch of logos. What they buy into is a story of a customer of yours that is similar to them. And so that is what you put in your case study. If I am selling to a larger company that needs a sales system overhaul, more or less, then I'm going to put in a case study of a Series A, Series B company that I've helped, and I would talk about their transformation. If I'm talking to an earlier stage founder looking to go through my sales accelerator, I'll be talking about Katie's transformation, where she went from 0 to 5.8 million in 9 months. So depending on who you are selling to, you change the case study if you have multiple products or propositions. And then you always have a next step. I can't emphasize this enough. Always have a next step, and you need to prescribe the next step. Don't ask your prospect for what they think. You should be saying, this is what I would suggest we do. Cool. Now, when you're engaging with your prospect, the first thing you need to identify is the problem, right? Need here. A very old school but potentially useful methodology to think about is, particularly if you're selling to businesses, is this methodology called BANT. And the first one stands for budget. Do they have the budget? Authority. Are they the right person who can actually sign off on this product or proposition? And when would they actually need it or want it? And you can ask the right questions, ask a sequence of questions to identify these, but those don't matter if you don't have the problem. So don't do this in order. Start with the problem, and then if it's big enough, then you can start to litter in these questions like, so do you have authority to sign off on something like this? And if they say no, you say, well, who else do we need to involve in this conversation to get this over the line? And then they'll tell you. And then you ask, well, can we set up a meeting with Jane or Steve or whoever it is? And the same goes for budget or timing. Like, do they have adequate budget? And when do they see, or what would prevent them from doing this as well? Because that usually highlights either an issue with timing or budget. One thing on budget that I would say as well, guys, if the problem is big enough and you're selling to a big enough business, budget can absolutely be found. So don't be disheartened if they say we don't have the budget. You just need to go high enough to get it. And then the proposal framework, and I'm racing through this because I realize this is an hour long. We've got 15 minutes left. But when it comes to the proposal, the key thing I want you to take away from this is you have to personalize this. If you have a templated proposal, it's just much less likely to be signed off. But if you have personalized this based on your interactions from the discovery right through, this is going to hit the mark so much better. That first slide, put their logo on it, and then put in like a line on the desired outcome. Make it about them. Remember, you're not the hero. They are the hero. You are simply the guiding hand to help them achieve this particular outcome. And then I would summarize the relationship of what you have understood about their business, how many times you've interacted together. And then I would talk about where they are now versus where they want to go. And you've already understood this, right? Because you went through that really deep discovery. And so I would have that on a slide because, again, you're making this about them. Sometimes it makes sense to also include like the market opportunity for them, showing that you understand their business. But in some cases, that slide is obviously not warranted. So you've got their logo, a summary of the relationship, where they are, where they want to go, and meaning like what are the key problems they really need to overcome to achieve that. And if you have those, that just straight away feels like, whoa, this person, this sales rep or this founder really understands me. Like they totally get me and I want to do business with them. That's what this framework does. And with, I suspect most of you use call recordings, right? And so you can pull this information out very, very quickly with uploading a transcript to ChatGPT, using the right prompt to ask, can you summarize our relationship? Can you summarize their key problems and where they're wanting to go? Can you summarize where they are now, versus where they want to go and their key problems? So that's done in 20 seconds. And then you're copying and pasting it onto a template, which takes you another 5 minutes maybe. And so that whole process does not take you long. It's manual, but you speed yourself up with the help of AI. And then you jump into your tailored offer. So, and I would just tweak the wording accordingly for whoever you are selling to. I would then put in a timeline of how long it can take for them to expect results. And then I would put in the investment. And I would call this slide an investment because price suggests taking away, whereas investment suggests they are getting, like, there is going to be a return on this. So just change the word. And again, have a next step. If you've got to the point of a proposal, hopefully the next step is contract or sign up or something like that. But maybe it might be, if you are not yet with the economic buyer, so you're with someone internally, if you're selling to enterprise, let's say, there's usually numerous buyers or numerous people that need to be involved in the sales process. If you're not yet in front of that economic buyer, then that next step might be with your champion to make sure this proposal is squeaky clean, to then take it to the economic buyer. But largely, that next step is contract or just sign up if you've got a easy way to sign up online. And I do see there's been some questions coming through, but what I'll do is I will grab those all at the end. And so when it comes to persuasion, here are some things that I think you should understand. Is first one, reciprocity. So if you give free value, and often this comes from when you're generating leads, right? You are giving away free value, educational content to your ideal customer to show that you can help them. And by helping them, they trust you. And so if you give that early, that builds that trust. Now you can also do it on sales calls. So when they start to talk about some of their problems and you think there might be some quick fixes, tell them what they are, because that is going to build that trust. The next thing is that people love to be consistent. So if you get some micro commitments along this sales journey, like, again, agreement of next steps, or when you're talking about demos and they're agreeing that it could change their business in this particular way, they are, without really realizing it, they're talking themselves into working with you. So ask for those micro commitments. And I've already touched on this, but you don't want to be their friend. You don't want to be someone that they call to go and have a beer with. You want to be the person they call when they have the problem. And so be the respected expert. You don't need to be liked, although it helps, but being liked doesn't get the deal done. Being trusted to do the job gets the deal done. Now, when a prospect goes dark, and the reason I put this in here is that I hear this all the time, where people get ghosted. And it happens to me, it happens to everybody. And when that happens, what I suggest you do is say something like, whether it's via WhatsApp or email or LinkedIn, like, I'm confused. You said you had this particular problem and it was causing you this amount of stress or whatever it is. What happened? I thought we were going to work on this together. And most times they will come back to you. You can also handle pricing objections in the same way. So if you have identified that the gap is £1 million, and I'm using whole numbers to make the math easy, and then your solution is £50,000, and they say it's just too expensive, you say, well, hang on a second, Steve. I'm confused. You said that this could save you £1 million a year. How is £50,000 too expensive? And so use logic in handling that objection, and you lead with "I'm confused." And I've already touched on this, but like sales is first emotional, and that needs to be like felt first, and then you can reinforce it with economics or logic. And from a pricing perspective, I get a lot of questions about pricing. So I wanted to add some stuff in here too, that when you understand the gap, it becomes much easier to value base your pricing. So if you think someone's going to get X amount of value, or you know that an alternative solution costs them 10, 20 times more, then valuing your pricing or adjusting your pricing based on that value is a very good way to go. So if you're a services-based business where the work might actually change if the company is bigger and more, and the gap becomes bigger, but also the complexity of delivery probably changes too. So valuing or pricing your services based on that gap is completely okay. So the same delivery for one company may be quite different to another. On a similar point, like price anchoring on the size of the problem is the best way, I think, to go about value pricing. So using the example before, £1 million problem, £50,000 solution makes a logical sense. And then the other one is like, what are the different options that someone could buy? So I said this before, but if the current solution is like they have to manually do something which arguably costs them £50 every time, and with your platform it now only costs £1 per thing, then that is also a return for them, right? Because they don't have to spend this manual time doing this thing that you can automate. I touched on this before, but refer to your price as an investment. If you're a personal trainer, it's an investment in your body in the future. It's not the price of your services, so you can apply this to, I think, any industry, any profession, about it being an investment. And the next thing, I would always offer a guarantee. Like if this doesn't work, I'll just give you your money back. And that reduces the barrier, because the person thinks, this is risk-free. And if I don't get the results, then I get a refund. Now, obviously you have some caveats there, like they have to do A, B, and C to qualify. But I mean, in my case, like if anyone asks for a refund, not that that's happened, I would just give it, because it's like you haven't got the value if you're asking for that refund. And I don't think you should ever need a discount. But if all else fails, I would throw in extras or bonuses rather than discounting. So rather than discounting, you might give them a personalized onboarding or something along those lines. And now when we talk about demos, I would solve exactly. So don't go off and show them your favorite feature. Solve their problem. That is a really key thing, and resist the urge to jump into a demo before doing a thorough discovery. And I've already hammered that point on numerous occasions. And for demos, I haven't gone into detail here, but there is a complete guide in the Sales Vault, which you're going to get access to. Oh, and so I am kicking off a sales accelerator on the 27th of October. Ooh. Sorry, everybody. And this is the accelerator that Katie managed to, in the first 4 weeks, she did 64 leads and 50K of revenue. 4 months in, she did 508,000 in revenue. 9 months, she had done 800,000. This is invoiced. And she had booked $5.8 million of revenue using a system that is taught in the Snowballing Accelerator. If you're interested in going through that, then here is the link. So www.snowballing.com/30-day sales accelerator. And that starts in, I think, 18 days, maybe 19 days. And just throw in a 10% off code. So if you type in Barclays, when you sign up for that, you'll get 10% off, which is valid for the next 24 hours. So if that is of interest to anybody and you really want to nail this last quarter and go into 2026 with a healthy pipeline, then this is the way to do it. And then to get the free templates is the snowballing.com website, but /sales-vault. So that is where you go to get those. And I believe, Lily, if I'm not mistaken, that these can be sent out to the attendees as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, sure. We'll link what you've linked in the chat function as well, so people can go back onto it too, but also can rewatch on YouTube as well.
Perfect. So that's where you can get those free templates. And other than that, connect with me on LinkedIn. If you ever have any questions about some of the stuff we went through, more than happy to exchange some ideas over message. So that's where you can do that. If the QR code doesn't work, just Michael Lovegrove on LinkedIn. You'll see the purple banner. And other than that, questions. So
yeah, we've got a few that have come through in the chat, so I'll try and get through all of them, Mike. But just on behalf of the rest of the audience and myself, thank you so much for the presentation today. I'm sure everybody found it super useful. A couple of questions that have come through. One person's asked, how do you overcome objections that feel like a hard no?
I think you usually, without knowing the exact objection, it's sort of hard to answer specifically, but I would always think about answering an objection with a question, and you just get them to air it out further. Now, sometimes like a really hard objection is just like, okay, there's no fit here. And that's the reality of it. But I think if you're convicted that you can help this person, then a lot of those objections can be overcome by just problem solving that specific area. So the big one that usually is a problem is obviously budget. And we just don't have the budget for that. And you can, there are numerous different ways that you can think about solving for that, like getting to the right economic buyer, like putting a return on investment, like calculator together to show them the value they're going to get, like giving them a guarantee. And so if you're constantly getting the same objection, I would be looking at, okay, how can I solve that, or even lead with that to start with? And if you know that people are already thinking it, just lead with it. Like, oh yeah, this is an expensive solution. This is why. And this is the value our customers have been getting. And so, yeah, I think if you approach it in that way, then that's how you sort of solve the big, hard objections.
It's sort of similar, but maybe a little bit kind of more detailed. I think this was kind of in relation to the slide around setting the agenda and kind of setting the scene of the meeting. Somebody's asked, they tried doing that only to have someone say, we just wanted a scoping call and wanted to find out more without buying anything. How do you deal with this scoping call stuff?
Yeah, so I think when someone says, look, I just want to know more about your product, it's like, well, in order for me to show you the right part of the product or to give you the right information, I honestly need to know more about your business. And I would stay firm on that. And if they say, no, we just want to know more about your product, and I would just say, look, that's not going to, they're not going to be a good customer to work with. So I would just cancel that call.
Yeah. And then regarding the discovery format, if you think that they have a problem that they've not been able to identify themselves, or they've wrongly identified / dismissed something else being the problem that kind of you haven't thought of, how do you go there without threatening or emotionally challenging them?
Well, I think you do it in the form of asking a question. So you phrase whatever problem it is you think they have in a question and make it targeted so that they understand that it is a problem. So I'll give you a quick example. If I'm talking to someone and they say, yeah, our sales is sorted. And then I said, okay, so did you hit your targets last month? And then they say, oh, no. Like, how far off were you? We were 20 grand or something. Like, okay, so across the year, that means you're like 240K potentially in annualized revenue you just missed out on. Are you sure your sales is okay? And that's how I would position it. Now you're asking the question to make them understand that, oh, okay, this is a problem.
Sure. Yeah, no, that's really helpful. Somebody who's at a bit of an earlier stage has asked, they don't necessarily have a real customer to point at this point, but what would your advice be? And they suggested, would it be kind of create an imaginary customer and do it that way? Or
in terms of, if I'm understanding the question correctly, that's in terms of having like a case study to talk about.
Yeah, I assume that as well. Yeah.
So I wouldn't make something up. I would say that hypothetically, maybe this is the type of outcome that you could achieve. Or when it comes to like setting the scene, I would just miss off the part around that initial storytelling before you get into the questioning, because agreeing on the objective and agenda does enough to earn the right to ask questions. It's just setting the scene helps more so. So if you don't have a case study, it's not the end of the world. You can still run that process.
Yeah. And then lastly, I think we've covered all the rest. What do you think is the biggest part of that sales pitch that people overlook or under prepare for?
That discovery, 100%. If you get that wrong, like deals are won and lost with a good discovery. And spend the time to really train yourself on how to do that well. Practice with your partner, practice with a friend. It's the amount of, like, say my own close rates and the teams that I've worked with, the close rates become really high when the discovery is run like that, because it's not about being a numbers game. It's really about finding that core problem, understanding it, understand the impact, the root cause, and quantifying it. When you do that, the prospect also understands it and wants to engage with you because they see you as a subject matter expert. And so, yeah, I can't emphasize this enough. The discovery is like the most important part. And it kind of makes sense, right? If you don't do a good job of that, you don't really move on to the proposal. You don't really move on to negotiating because the problem hasn't been identified.
Yeah, perfect. Brill, thank you. That covers all our questions, and thanks so much again for this session, Mike. It was great, and even I've learned a lot, so thank you. Very, very appreciative of that. Just to clarify on the links that Mike shared in his slides, they'll be sent in the post-event comms from Eventbrite along with the replay, not in the chat. So if you are looking for them, that's where you'll find them. Huge thanks from us at Eagle Labs for joining us today. Again, if you're not aware of Eagle Labs, please to find out about all of the support that is available to businesses just like yours. And obviously Mike shared his socials as well, so you can catch up with him separately if needs be. But thank you everybody for joining. Have a lovely rest of your day and week, and we'll catch you next time.
Thanks everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.